All right, friends, as we settle into our sermon time today on our journey with the Psalms of Summer, I first want to orient us in kind of where we are, as in what happened last Sunday, what's happening next Sunday, and then land us right where we are today, okay? So last Sunday, we got to celebrate the monumental moment that Kirkland Place for Families and Women has opened. We got to celebrate the ribbon cutting of a shelter on land that used to be ours, the marking of the arrival of our new neighbors. Just such a joy to be a part of the massive collaboration of so many partners in this work in engaging with homelessness. So from our conversation that we had last Sunday, as we celebrated, there are three things we want to be sure that you heard from that time, because there was a lot of things happening. We want to make sure that you heard these three things amidst all the confetti and balloon drop and everything else. So the first thing, number one, this is a threshold moment as we begin a new season of engagement with homelessness here at Salt House. This is a moment of change. By saying yes to Kirkland Place for Families and Women, a 100-bed shelter, our new neighbors will change us in ways that are glorious and challenging and yet to be discovered. And it's also going to change the ways in which we engage with homelessness. So we're just mindful that we are crossing the threshold into something new as we engage with homelessness. So I want you to hear that. Second, we were about $12,000 short on our hoped-for offerings for the month of July, that first month of fiscal year 2021. Our budget supports our engagement with homelessness by sustaining the leadership of our staff and paying for our building and grounds and resources that we are able to share with those who need it. And we wanted to say that because we're always transparent about our finances, but especially now as so many people are asking about how we're doing. And especially now also because, y'all, this community, man, this is a community that says yes when the need arises. We have lived such a story of generosity together here at Salt House. We got to retell that story a bit last Sunday. And so we want to be sure that we named that need. So please consider your ability to say yes to increasing your generosity with Salt House, or even just giving for the first time, whether you are local or benefiting from the work that we do together at a distance. And even as I say this, please know always that there is abundant grace, especially at this time when giving is not possible for many of us, okay? So third and finally, we are building a new Salt House shelter team. This is going to be a group of people, and this is for all the people in the Salt House community who want to be on the front line of engaging with homelessness. Being on this team just means you'll be included on an email list where we'll share project-based opportunities that you can opt into as it works for you. We're hoping as many of our community will be a part of this team as possible. The current urgent need right now is all around school beginning, because school right now, local school, it's all at home. It's distance learning, and this is for kids then who do not have a home. So they will be doing this work at the shelter. So just three immediate opportunities in the midst of that are donating school supplies, drop them off here at Salt House. We would love that. Second, being part of our team that we're going to build that's going to be a consultation team to help the shelter kind of set up what remote learning looks like and how they support that work with kids. And third, that we're just looking for some folks to build a team to help host our fall pumpkin party. It'll be outside in Salt House's backyard as we share just a time of pumpkin painting. And we'd love some people to run with that, to do it in a social distance, safe yet fun way. More opportunities are coming, making meals, putting together welcome baskets, tutoring students. But check out the link to sign up to join the new shelter team to hear about this and more as those needs arise and get those notifications. So those are the three things that you need to hear, you need to know from last Sunday when we celebrated all that God has done to make Kirkland Place for Families and Women possible. So just thank you, friends, for your yeses all along the way. So then next Sunday, Labor Day weekend, it will be a Sabbath Sunday for us, which is when we don't have a time where we gather together as a community for worship, but we give our staff a break and we invite our whole community to take a break, you to intentionally stop, to cease striving, as that word Sabbath means, to rest. There are many ways in which we have been forced to stop certain things in our lives during this pandemic. But what might next weekend look like to take a bit of time to rest, to stop, in ways that are truly restorative. It shouldn't be like ambitious or even like Instagram worthy, right? But how might you intentionally choose something that would recharge or even reignite you? So this week we'll release a brief video invitation into that Sabbath time. It'll be in our weekly e-news, so check your inbox on Thursday morning for that as you hear that invitation into Sabbath next weekend, okay? Okay. So last week, next week, and now today. Man, we are gathering this time hungry to hear from God in the midst of a week just filled with so much, including so much heartbreak in the midst of pandemic, the shooting of Jacob Blake by police, just staring down what it means to start school next week. So we bring all of it, all of who we are, as we turn now to the Psalms. To set the course for where we're going, I want to offer just a quote that I heard in Kate Bowler's podcast, Everything Happens, as I listened to her latest episode this week. She was interviewing author Shauna Niequist, who said this: "We live and die by the stories that we tell about ourselves. We live and die by the stories that we tell about ourselves. We cling to those narratives that are formed in us through childhood and into adulthood. So often, those stories are not even conscious to us. And the great work of our lives can be recognizing our stories that we are telling about ourselves and examining why they're there and owning that we have the power to, when appropriate, change those stories, to find the new story about ourselves that needs to be told. And I wonder if this resonates for you. Has this been true? Have you found this to be true in your own life about the stories that you tell about yourself? So we have a core practice here at Salt House that stories matter. They matter in this way because we live and die by the stories that we tell about ourselves. Our stories matter because they affect everything about how we move through this world, right? And stories matter because as Jesus followers, we are storied people. The story of the God of Israel and the God known in Jesus is our story that continues to form our unfolding stories now. And one way that we put this core practice of ours into actual practice is in what we call our Salt House stories. During our sermon time, we hear from one of our own from Salt House because hearing the stories of others matters. And today we get to hear from Macy Zwanzig. She'll tell you about herself, but you should also know that she serves on our church council as an at-large member, and she's also the liaison from council in our work in engaging homelessness. Macy, I'm so grateful for you here in our community, for the presence of your family in our community, and also for what you are about to share now. My friends, Macy is just going to dive right in, and you see, when I asked her if she would share a Salt House story, she said that it would be really hard to do that right now. And I said, it's not that you have to share like your whole story. It really is just about picking up like one thread, like one thing that's kind of active for you right now and looking at how it connects back and even forward in your story, right? Just talk about this one thing. And she said, well, yeah, but that's what makes it feel so impossible. There are so many things that are active for me right now. And I don't know that any of them are ready to be talked about. And I wonder, friends, if you might have a similar response, that there is so much like active for you right now, or so much that you've stuffed below the surface because it's just such a challenging time to find time and space and bandwidth and support right now. Which is why I'm so grateful for Macy's yes and for what she's about to share, because she's doing the brave work of diving right into her story and what's active for her. And we dive into bringing along with us our own story, letting God nudge us about how this connects to our own journey. And as we experience this together, notice how the Psalms, as well as the whole story of God, tell a story that is being told about Macy and about each of us. And the invitation in this story is to let these stories that we read in the Psalms and beyond, they become our stories that we get to tell about ourselves too, about being the beloved of God, about a God who hears us and who is with us, who wants to know us as we are. So friends, We would love to hear your comments and responses as we go through this, as you're able to share them, as things come up for you while Macy is speaking or during the song after, kind of take a moment to reflect. So do pay attention, listen for what comes up, and for how God speaks to you in this time. Okay? So take a deep breath with me as we open and we welcome to the Salt House microphone, Macy Zwanzig.
Hi, Salt House. My name is Macy. I first want to say hello to Sylvia, my 2.5-year-old. Hello, Delphine, my 5.5-year-old. They'll think it's funny that I'm sitting beside them and also on the screen. And yes, Peter, I am wearing lipstick. Peter is my hubby. So I've been going to Salt House for about 3 years now, and I've loved it since the first time I went. So it's a privilege and scary to be sharing with you today about my story. I'm a teacher at Redmond High School. I teach science. And so for all of you that are having kids at home that are learning, or are teachers yourselves, or for the students that are watching, I feel your anxiety bubbling up. I can feel it in myself. This is going to be weird, but I hope that it will let us rethink some things in a really positive way around education. So Sylvia, my 2.5-year-old, has started doing something really adorable. And it's really cute because I don't remember Delphine doing this at this age. But she started to express her emotions. So the other day, she said, "I sad," and she puckered out her lips and furrowed her brow. It was so sweet. Or even last weekend, we were floating down the river, the Snoqualmie River, which is a bad idea when you have a 2.5-year-old and you're trapped on a tube. But she was really scared, and she said, "I scared," and then screamed a lot. Or if Delphine is crying, she'll say, "Delphine sad." And it's so sweet and tender to watch her develop her sense of her emotions and to be able to actually name those emotions. And I think it's really important and beautiful because I don't feel like that's something that I did as a kid, or at least I wasn't really taught to do that. So I grew up in the South, in Virginia to be exact, and there were a lot of emotions that weren't allowed in my house, especially anger or sadness. Those emotions just really weren't tolerated. And I'm really beginning to work on the toll that really took on me and is taking on me as I kind of unwind my story and see how much damage was done from not being allowed to feel that way as a kid. And I love my parents, and I know sincerely that they did the best that they could. I was a honeymoon baby, where my parents were very quickly thrown into parenthood. I'm the oldest of 4, and my parents had 4 kids within the span of 5 years, which makes my uterus hurt just thinking about that. I was raised in a very conservative, rural, southern community in an evangelical Mennonite church, which is just as weird as it sounds, to parents that I'm convinced still have a lot of room to grow emotionally. My dad and I have butted heads for my entire life. He has been angry for his entire life for reasons that we don't have time to talk about today. And he took it out on his kids, especially me, but I'm probably biased. I wonder what my siblings would say. He was an authoritarian ruler of the household. I remember multiple instances of being spanked for one thing or another, and where he would come in afterwards and he would ask me why I did what I did. And I wanted to explain myself, but because I was a kid, it usually came out, really strong language, really strong emotions. And that just, to him, was me being kind of subversive. No, you're not learning the lesson that I want you to learn here. So he would spank me again, and then I would try to have him see it my way again, but this is what I was thinking, this is what I was feeling. No, that wasn't tolerated, not allowed. You had to see it his way, or you would be spanked again. I remember several times being spanked, at least 3 times. And at some point in elementary school, I learned that if I shared what I felt, or I tried to explain my emotions, it was just irrelevant. It was unhelpful. There were certain emotions that just were not allowed. And so I stopped trying to share them. Lesson learned. My mom is still, to this day, a superhuman to me. She worked full-time for her entire working career teaching high needs students in like a transition classroom setting. She did this for 36 years. She only took 6 weeks off each time one of us kids was born, which is crazy to me. She carted us around to all of our lessons. We did piano, we did swimming, we did basketball, we did baseball. The house was always clean. Lunches were always packed for us. Laundry was always folded for us. Scratch meals were always served hot. I have very few memories of her hanging out with her friends or just doing things that she wanted to do for herself. And if you would ask her how she was or how she managed this while we were growing up, she would say, "It was fine. I'm fine." Everything was always fine. Even when I found out several years ago that my dad had had an affair when I was in the 8th grade, she recounted that she cried for one day, she gave him an ultimatum for how to stay a part of our family, and then she soldiered on. When I've tried to have a deeper emotional connection with my mom through the years, specifically about what it is to be a woman, there's almost a void, a lack of knowing how to connect in this way. It's a deep resentment that I hold against her, and I'm still working through it. I wanted and I still long for that intimate connection with my mom that a daughter and a mom hold sacred. And this longing feels especially poignant because I have 2 daughters myself. But I'm learning that maybe that's just something she won't be able to do. And really, in many ways, I too am just scratching the surface of what it means to be emotive. One of my dear friends, shout out to Amy Shackle, started this project at the beginning of quarantine called the 100-Day Project. She is an art teacher at Redmond High School, and she painted for 100 days straight. We were talking about her experience, and she asked, "What would you do for 100 days if you could?" I thought for a second. I said, "I think I would probably write." "What would you write about?" she asked. "I'm not sure. I need to think about it more." Fast forward a few weeks, and my family and I were on a socially distant camping trip with another group of friends. I was talking with a woman who is also a 1 on the Enneagram, and we were sharing how angry we are on the inside and how much difficulty we both have in being open about our anger. It's such a stigmatized emotion. And then it hit me. I need to write about my anger. When I got home, I started my own 100 Days project. It's 100 Days of Anger, a journal. I personally love the drama that the name invokes. This practice of writing about my anger, it's changing me. I am learning about how deep the anger goes. And I am learning that very often, there are many other emotions beneath the anger that are more accurately represent what I actually feel about a person or an experience. Interestingly, but probably not coincidentally, this experience has also been paired with me going to Craniosacral Therapy, which is therapy practice that Pastor Sara has talked a lot about as she's undergone recovery from post-concussion syndrome. It's where a therapist makes slight muscular adjustments to your body, to your muscles, in order to be better aligned. But as it gets more aligned, it can open the floodgates to emotions that are buried deep within. And it has done just that. I am weeks deep into experiencing so many emotions and writing about all of them. And it hurts so good. And I don't love it, all at the same time. But I also wouldn't take it back. I am realizing that I have no problem explaining what I have felt in the past, but I have a real problem being present to my emotions and letting others see me in a space of vulnerability. For instance, I always want to cry during a church service, but I just struggle to let myself do that. But with a home service, I don't let it loose, but it's as loose as it's going to get right now. And Delphine is always asking, "Why are you crying this time?" I will get anxious before craniosacral therapy because it means I will be crying, and it feels so scary to let someone see me be exactly what I am in the present moment. Even just thinking about it makes me cry. It would be no surprise to you, having heard all of this, that according to my craniosacral therapist, I have an energy blockage from my heart all the way up to my voice box. From where we feel all the way up to where we say that what we feel. And that may sound kind of woo-woo to some, and that's okay. But for me, it feels so very profound. The body remembers and it holds on to what is buried from years of suppression, emotional suppression too. As Brené Brown says, emotions that aren't allowed to be felt are not benign. In other words, what we don't let ourselves feel now, we will feel later in life, and often in pretty severe ways, like chronic illness. What I love about the Psalms is that no emotion is off of the table. The range of the human emotional experience is expressed over and over without censorship. The Psalms show us the way to be human. They give us permission to feel all of the feels, as my students would say. Something that struck me while Rabbi Ted was sharing about my favorite verse, "Be still and know that I am God," was how he changed it slightly. He said, "Be still and know that your I am is God. Your I am is God. My I am is that I am angry." And I am working through a lot of other emotional stuff. And in that, there is God. It's all God. There are no emotions that aren't divine. We can feel them all. To me, this is slowly revolutionary. Pastor Ryan said something really transformative to me as I was reading the draft of this message to him last week, and I think it's changing my life. He asked, "Do you feel like you've ever been able to be authentically yourself in front of the real God?" What? Have I ever been open enough to let the real God see my true joy, my true sorrow, my true devastation, etc., etc., etc.? I thought for a quick moment and I realized that the answer is no. I tamp down my true joy. I hide my true sorrow. I mute my truest emotions into something more palatable. But the real God isn't my mom and doesn't need me to just be fine. And the real God isn't my dad and doesn't need me to hide my emotions as a form of submission or complicity or compliance. The real God wants all of me. The real God is in all of these emotions and is begging me and my body to release and to be present to the gamut of the human emotional experience. The analogy that I thought of while I was half asleep a couple nights ago was this. Imagine you were weeding the garden. You get to a weed with a really deep taproot, like a dandelion or burdock root. You pull. And that root is really lodged into the soil. But as you pull, the ground keeps opening, it keeps softening until finally you pull the root out cleanly. There's no better feeling, and you may know this if you're a big gardener or you weed your yard. There's just nothing better than pulling out a taproot cleanly. It's like, what? I got the whole thing? This is amazing. But there's a softness that has to happen in order for that taproot to come out cleanly. And it's the same for me with the emotions I'm learning to let myself feel fully and to express in the present moment. In order to weed out those emotions that have long been buried, I have to be open and be soft. I have to trust those emotions are okay and that feeling them fully can be productive. And so as I end, my encouragement and prayer to you, Salt House, is that you would soften yourself, that we would soften ourselves to the gamut of the emotions that we all feel, and to let ourselves feel them all. I pray that we can give ourselves permission to feel them in their fullness, because let's be honest, there are so many crises that are taking place simultaneously, and we have a lot of feelings. At least I'm speaking for myself here. My prayer is that we may know that the real God, the creator of body and of mind and of emotion, embraces every bit of us and our emotional experience in real time, as our emotions are unfolding and raw. I pray that we can be still in that we can sit in it, and that we can know that who we are and what we feel in the present moment is of God. Thanks for listening.